بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وبارك على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد, alhamdulillah, we have reached what we intend, inshallah, time permitting, our final two topics regarding this chapter here, and we wish to just go through these final topics, which will conclude all of the discussion around nikah wa talaq. And the final, or the penultimate topic, the second to last topic we should discuss, is nafaqah al-aqarib wal mamalik. And this is in relation to the spending upon those that are your relatives or those that you own. Of course, referring to the topic of slavery, spending upon each and every one of these two. And so this matter of nafaqah, the spending and the distribution of a person's wealth, then it's an obligation ala tartib. It's an obligation in an ordinal manner. So the first you have the aqarib. And so the aqarib are the relatives, the individuals that is an obligation upon a person to spend upon. And then you have those that are owned by the individual. And mamalik are the jam' al-mamluk, the plural of those who are owned. And the raqiq. It can also be referred to as referring to not just the raqiq, the slaves, but also the dawab, so the cattle, the riding beasts. So all of these things, there are specific rulings in terms of how a person spends his wealth upon them. So whether it be the relatives, whether it be those that a person owns, or those animals that a person owns. And so the author begins by mentioning وَعَلَى الْإِنسَانِ نَفَقَ وَالِدَيْهِ وَإِنْ عَلَوْا أو إن علوا وَأَوْلَادِ وَإِنْ سَفَلُوا. And so it's upon the person to spend upon his parents and those that are ascending. Alright, so the generation ascending from the parents. So the parents, the grandparents, and if a person, if they are alive, great grandparents as well. So there's what is understood from this al-ala al-ajdad, the grandparents. Yunfiq alayhim. So the individual spends upon them. And so when we understand, when we mention spending upon them, what we understand from this is that he provides for them. He establishes provisions for them. As they are individuals that have come from his nasab, from his lineage. Type. And so initially, al-ab yunfiq ala waladi. Naam. And so initially the father spends upon his child. And thereafter the child will spend upon the father and those that are older as well. So the ajdad and those, the grandparents and those that are older than that. When we understand from this as well, is not necessarily just spending of the wealth, but providing for them shelter and everything that is inclusive of their needs. Everything that's inclusive of their needs. This particular hukm here, barakallahu fikum, clearly indicates that an individual is responsible for their parents if they are in need of their provisions. And so an individual does not engage in what you find is prevalent, especially in lands such as these, where the people will place their parents into care homes once they get to a specific age, or they get to a specific lack of mobility or lack of cohesiveness. And so in that scenario, they'll place them in care homes and require that these other individuals care for their parents. And rather, what was upon them is that they take responsibility of that, and they take responsibility in terms of spending upon the parents if they're in need of that. Thereafter is what it mentions, al-awlad. Al-awlad, so the children. So it's upon the parents to spend upon their children. Na'am, wa in safaru. And if as well, likewise, we have those generations that are descending. So we have the generations that are not only the generations of the children, but the grandchildren and great-grandchildren as well, if there are there present as well. So you have an ibn or an ibn al-ibn, either the son or the son of the son, that a person spends upon each and every one of these individuals. Likewise as well, man yarithuhu بفرض وتعصيب إذا كانوا فقراء وله مال ينفق عليهم. And so, likewise as well, the person, he can spend upon the one that would inherit from him. So any individual that would inherit from him. So essentially, those individuals that have been given a specific relationship, or the relationship has been established between them, and this relationship is clear due to the fact that these individuals inherit from them. And so they would spend upon these individuals. They can spend upon them in relation to the amount that they will inherit. So, for example, now Shaykh Fawzani mentions that if now the abawat, so a person is going to inherit from an individual. However, the parents of that particular individual, say it's a child, the parents of that child are not able financially to spend upon that child. نعم ولا يستطيعان الإنفاق على الطفل. So they're not able to spend upon that child. Then the matter becomes an obligation upon the warith. Naam, there comes an obligation upon the one that is going to inherit or is going to take the inheritance from them. Now, is that clear, Barakallahu Fikum? So, initially, we said the asl is that the one that spends upon that child is the parents. But now, if there's a mani, if there's something that prevents the parents spending upon the child, for example, al-faqr, for example, poverty, then this matter will go to the one that the child would inherit from. So, and so the person inherits, or what they spend would be the likeness of what they would inherit from them. So, for example, if now, Shaykh Fawzani mentions the example, if this person would inherit from this individual sudus, then a sixth of that particular amount. Then upon him is a sudus of nafaqah. Upon him is a sixth of the nafaqah, of what needs to be spent. Now, a sixth of what though? Let's say it's a sixth of what though? Question clear? No? He nodded, so he might have to be able to explain it to you. Now, so we say now, for example, if we say that the individual will spend upon another based upon the inheritance that he's due, yes? So he's due, for example, a sixth from that person. In terms of what he spends for upon him, in the case where the parents aren't able to spend and look after that child, then he spends the same amount, a sixth. But then the question is now, a sixth of what? A sixth of his income. So let's say, for example, he earns £2,000 for the month. He gives a sixth of that money for that child. If that's his income, you're saying. Okay. You don't agree? So a sixth of his income. You disagree? Okay.
Would it be a sixth of what's remaining after spending on the two categories mentioned previously?
So sixth remaining after spending on two categories previously, which are?
The parents and the descending and the children and the descending.
Okay, so he spends, so this individual, he spends on his parents, he spends on his own children, and then these individuals, or sixth or whatever remains from that. Okay, anyone agree with that? You've got two answers now. He just points to, he says, yeah, I like his answer. Anyone else got any other answer? AKA the right answer. No? So it's a sixth of whatever is the child needs from the nafaqah. So now, for example, if we were to use the two examples mentioned, okay, they're good answers, but just wrong. But if you were to use the two examples now, if it was a sixth of his wealth, it could be a case of a person spends a sixth of his wealth and there's excess because the person earns a specific amount, and a sixth of that is a complete excess. Type. Or if we were to say a sixth of whatever's left over, then again, it could be excess. Nah. So it's a sixth of whatever is in the child's in need of. So let's say, for example, the child's needs amount to £300 for the £300 for the month. Now, so then a sixth of that would be what he has to pay, and that would be how much?
Yeah,
50.
You said 300, right?
Yeah.
A sixth of that.
A sixth.
Yeah, 50.
No. No. A sixth of that's 50. So that essentially is how it would be paid. That's essentially how it would be paid. That was what would be upon him. However, let's say, for example, now he's not able to pay that sixth, because we mentioned now, if he was to pay a sixth of his wealth or his income, then that may be going to excess. Or if he was to pay a sixth of whatever's left over, that might also go into excess. But what about if there is a deficit? What about the opposite now? If there's a deficit, then what would the person do? Clear? Question again? No. There's a deficit, barakallahu fikum. Answer's easy. Don't think too hard. No. He can't do anything more than he can do. So, and aslan, it's not the obligation upon him in the first instance. It's an obligation that came before, or to others before, and they're not able to fulfill it. So let's say, for example, now, the scenario where the parents are not able to fulfill it due to poverty. We cannot now say it's a complete obligation upon this individual if we're not saying it's a complete obligation upon the parents. Naam. And so this is what we understand from this, barakallahu fikum. Naam. So thereafter, we mentioned the mulak or mamlukin. And when it comes to spending upon the mamluk, that which is owned, and those that are owned from humans, referring to slaves, or those that are owned from the animals, the work animals and the likes of those. Then you spend upon them for whatever their needs are. Now, they spend upon them and whatever their needs are. And so, when it comes to this matter, if now a slave has multiple owners, then this is, you spend upon them in accordance to the share that you have in ownership. Now, the share that the person has in ownership. Does that make sense? No? So, if now, for example, just because the way you look at it, you have to understand it is like the slave is a commodity. So like any commodity, you are responsible for the share of that commodity, right? So the slave now, the slave costs, I don't know how much they cost these days, but the slave costs, let's say, £10,000. One person spends 50%, so it's £5,000. Another person spends 25%, £2,500. Another person spends another 25%, £2,500. Sorry. So it's 3 owners. Now, when it comes to the costs, the living costs, to make it easy, let's say the living costs that the person, you need to spend £100 to look after them for the month, right? The obligation upon the one that owns 50% is 50% of that cost. So you have to spend £50. The obligation of the one that owns 25% is £25, right? And obligation of the one that owns the 25% likewise, £25. So you spend in accordance with the percentage that you have of ownership of that slave. Now, likewise as well, if the person owns the animal, the riding beast, or the work animal, then as well the person spends in accordance with what they own. Now, in accordance with what they own. So, and so when it comes to the spending upon the slave, then this is in relation to their ta'am or sharab, so their food, their drink, wal qaswa, their clothing. Yeah, and this is what is understood in relation to nafaqah. Now that you feed and drink them, feed them and give them drink, and you provide for them clothing and the likes of that, and of course shelter. Now, in the scenario now where one of the owners in the masharaka, one of the owners is not able to provide for the upkeep of that individual, keep it simple, in the upkeep of the slave. If they're not able to do so, then what is upon them? Give up ownership? Yes, but just give it up. So you're saying, for example, let's say we have 3 individuals, 50%, 25, 25. One of the people that has 25 can't pay his £25 for the month. Then you're saying he has to give up his share. Okay, anyone agree?
Should we do it temporarily so you can pay and have the others pay it?
Temporarily?
Yeah, if it's possible.
Okay, so he comes to an agreement with them.
Yeah.
Temporarily. Okay. Anyone agree? They don't have any other answers?
If you can only afford 5%, does he sell over 20%? If the one that initially owes 25%,
yeah,
he sells the 20% because he can only afford 5%.
You can only afford 5%, so he sells the 20%. You're the closest.
He gives what he can.
Nah, he's the closest.
Sell it, does he just have to give that portion away?
No. He sells it, but he's forced to sell it. No. So he's now, if he's not able to pay for the upkeep, it's not that he just gives it away. So it's not that he just rescinds his right to the ownership, but he is now forced to sell it. Now, so he has to sell that particular share. So it's not a case of now, as you mentioned, that let's say for example he says, "Look, I can pay £5, so I'll sell the £20 or the 20%." No, if you can't, because you've agreed to pay or own this amount. So if you can't upkeep that amount that you've agreed to, then I'm going to sell that share, the whole share. Now, likewise, what you've mentioned in terms of if they come to an agreement, then that's okay. So if they come to an agreement and they say, look, for these next few months, you continue to pay for the upkeep, and then I'll pay you back whatever it is. So let's say, for example, 4 months, and then after that, I'll continue to pay my £25, but then I'll pay the £100 that I've owed for the 4 months that have gone by. You can come to those agreements as well, as long as there's an agreement between every one of the parties. But if now there's no agreement and this individual still has that share, then upon him is to sell that share, as Ibn Qudāmah mentions, إِذَا طَلَبُوا ذَلِكَ. If the other owners that are with him seek that from him. And what is understood from that, طَلَبُوا ذَلِكَ, if they seek that from him, meaning that they go to the qadi, they go to the judge, and they seek a ruling from the judge, where the judge now makes it an obligation for him to sell that share. Naam. And if this obligation is established, then in that scenario, barakallahu fikum, he has to sell that share that he has of that particular slave. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Now, after that, we have our final chapter that we want to discuss, which is the Bab al-Walīmah. Now, Bab, the chapter pertaining to the Walīmah. And al-Walīmah تكون بعد الزواج. So the Walīmah is after the zawaj, after the marriage. And it's that the person يصنع شيئا من الطعام ويدعو إليه. And so the person provides something from food and he invites others to it, to attend. So when it mentions after the zawaj, then it's referring to after the aqd nikah has been formally agreed. So at the end of the aqd nikah, then the person has the walima. Shaykh then goes on to mention, وَهِيَ سُنَّةٌ مُؤَكَّدَةٌ. And this is an encouraged and emphasized sunnah. فقد تزوج عبد الرحمن بن عوف رضي الله عنه على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم، فرأى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عليه أثر الزواج، فسأله فأخبره أنه قد تزوج، فقال له النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بارك الله لك أولم ولو بشاء. And so the narration, which is found in Bukhari and Muslim, متفق عليه, the narration is a narration of Abdul Rahman ibn Auf anhu, where the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam has seen from him that he had recently married, and he informed him, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf informed the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam that he had indeed married. And so the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to him, barakallahu lak, may Allah Ta'ala's blessings be for you, upon you. Establish the walima even if it's with the shah, with one sheep. Naam. So we understand from this is that within this wording here is that it's not necessarily the case that the person has to establish the walima with a sheep. Naam. But the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam mentions walau bisha, even with one sheep, meaning even with something with a small amount. Aham shay, the most important thing is the da'wah of the walima wal-i'lan and nikah, that the nikah is announced. Now, the main thing is that the person has invited others and that they announce the nikah. Now, and so this walīmah is mentioned, the i'lan nikah, yani announcing the marriage. And that the marriage itself should not be hidden. Or adam ikhfa'i. And this marriage should not be hidden. So that there's a clear distinction made. There's a clear distinction made that this particular marriage has been established. Yani it's a marriage in accordance with the Sharia. Naam. So then, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention, وهي, in relation to the ta'rif, the definition of the walīmah, وهي دعوة العرس وهي مستحبة. And so it's the invitation to the marriage, and it's a matter which is mustaḥabb. It's a matter which is recommended. And so this essentially here is outlining the hukum, the ruling of the walīmah. The ruling of the walīmah is mustaḥabb. Mustaḥabb meaning what? Barakallahu feekum. We mentioned it yesterday in the South Lancaster lesson, if anyone was there. Mustaḥabb. Recommended. That's naam. That's if it's a translated, that's what it means. But what is its definition? If you do the action, you're rewarded. Naam. And if you don't do it, then you are not blameworthy. Now this is mustaḥabb, otherwise known as mandūb or otherwise known as sunnah. So in relation to the walīmah, then it's referring to the walīmah as an action which is mustaḥabb. If you do it, you're rewarded. The person does so iqtidā'an li sunnati nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, adhering to the sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If the person for every reason does not do it, then he's not blameworthy for not doing so. No, he's not blameworthy for not doing so. He's not sinful. So, and the proof for establishing the walīmah is, as mentioned previously, the hadith of Abdurrahman ibn Auf. And so, when the Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam mentions in the walau bisha or walau bisha, naam, walau bisha, even with the sheep, then what's understood from this is aqallu shay, and you can establish the walīmah with that which is the least amount, and that the person should not engage in mubalagha fi. They should not be excessive with the walīmah. Wa israf, that the person should not engage in israf, yani excessive wastage of wealth and the likes of that. When it comes to the dhabā'ih, when it comes to the slaughtering of that they engage in with the walīmah. Naam. And so we understand from this is that this particular event should not be one where a person engages or is excessive in matters of dunya. Naam. The person excessive in matters of dunya, which of course will asaf, sad to say, that you see this matter occurring on a regular basis, where people spend excessively on the walīmah, where it's reached now alaf, thousands of pounds, just in order to establish the walīmah. And a lot of the time, this is just tabi'un, this is just something which is following the actions of non-Muslims and what they have done in terms of establishing of the walīmah, or establishing their weddings and the likes of that. So Allah Ta'ala knows best. So thereafter, Ibn Qudāmah goes on to mention, وَالْإِجَابَةُ إِلَيْهَا وَاجِبَةٌ, and answering the invitation is an obligation. So if a person is invited to the walīmah, they have to adhere to it and answer that invitation. لقول رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ومن لم يجب فقد عصى الله ورسوله. And so it's due to the narration of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam whoever does not answer, whoever does not oblige to that invitation to the walima, then indeed he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. This is a hadith found in Bukhari and Muslim. Now, and you have a narration where it mentions شر الطعام الوليمة يدع إليه الأغنياء ويترك الفقراء ومن لم يجب فقد عصى الله ورسوله. It said the most evil of food, i.e. the gatherings of food, is the walima, where the rich are invited to it, whilst the poor are left off. And whoever does not oblige or answer that invitation, then indeed he has disobeyed Allah and His Messenger. And so, the clear mentioning of ma'siyatillah wa ma'siyatu rasulillahi wa ma'siyati rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the clear mentioning of that is indication that it's not permissible, la yajuz, that a person rejects the walima invitation, except that he has a legitimate reason. Except that he has a legitimate reason. The legitimate reason is referring to the fact that if he is genuinely prevented from attending, if the individual genuinely prevented from attending, then it's illegitimate. For example, someone invites you to a walima in a land that you don't live in and you're not able to attend that land, then of course it can be said that this is a genuine reason. Because now there's a clear manner, there's a clear and distinct matter that has prevented you. And so this is what we understand from that Allah Ta'ala knows best. And now, thereafter as well, Ibn Qudāmah mentions as the final part, وَالنِّثَارُ وَالْتِقَاطُهُ مُبَاحٌ مَعَ كَرَاهَةٍ. And so this matter of al-nithar, al-tiqat, is during the walima, a practice during the walima where the groom goes around the individuals and throws money, and he spreads the money amongst the people, the hadirin, those that are present. And this action is one which is makruh, لأنه إسراف وإضاعة للمال. Why? Because within this action it's israf wa ida'at al-mal, and the person being excessive with the wealth and wasting of wealth as well. The wasting of wealth. And so Shaykh Fawzan goes on to mention, ولكن لمن أخذه فمن أخذ من النثار شيئا فهو له. So if now a person was to take that money, then it's his wealth. He's permitted to take it. So the person, so it's a practice of a person spreading the money. If they to take the wealth, then they're permitted to take it. And of course, this is something that maybe goes back to certain cultures, and based on certain cultures, because different cultures have different practices in the walimas, but the illah is still present. The illah being the reason being the wasting of wealth. If the wealth is being wasted away, or the action of wasting of wealth, or a person being excessive with wealth is being presented, then that illah is still present. So, for example, what you may know of, or you may see that is more prevalent in this day and age in terms of the custom, is the opposite. Now, where people the attendees throw wealth or throw money at the zawj or the zawja. So it throws the wealth or throws the money and cash at the woman, the wife, or from what is prevalent in some cultures, where they will throw the money at the mother of the bride. So the mother of the bride, she's in the gathering, and the people just put money on her. And if she was to take that money, then it's her money, it's her wealth. So, however, that action in of itself, it would be the same thing where we would compare it to the groom, spreading the money and throwing money as well. That is something which is makruh. It's something which is makruh, an excessive display of distribution of wealth. So, and then because I mentions finally in relation to that same practice, so if the groom was to do that, وَإِنْ عَلَى الْحَاضِرِينَ كَانَ أَوْلَى. So if he was to divide it amongst those that are present, then that is better. So that's better for them to do. So for example, if he was to say that I'm going to give, for example, £5 to everyone that attends, £5 note to everyone that attends. If he does that, then this particular practice is better as asan, due to the fact that it prevents this action or this issue of atazahum, people crowding around. Because if now what is expected is that people, or if this groom is just throwing money, then all that's going to be expected is people are going to crowd around to grab as much as they can. But if now what is understood is that each individual is going to receive solitary £5 note. That's really me fun. Solitary £5 note. They know they don't have to crowd around or do anything like that, because they know they're going to receive whatever has been ascribed to them. And so so as for giving everyone that which is their nasib, that which is their specific portion, then this is asan, this is better. Allah Ta'ala knows best. Ma'a, with the fact that, however, that this particular practice, aslan, is makruh. That this particular practice, anyway, is disliked. And Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala knows best. With that, we conclude what we should discuss with this particular chapter. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Barakallahu feekum wa jazakum Allahu khayra. Wa sallallahu wa barak. على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. نعم.
What level, you mentioned the rights the grandparents have over you. What level of rights the grandparents have over you? Say, especially if your parents aren't Muslim, so aren't potentially filling those rights that they would have over their grandparents have over them.
So, what rights do the grandparents have over you?
Over me, yeah.
If your parents aren't fulfilling their rights as their children, essentially.
Yeah, like is it upon you to sort of not take it upon yourself entirely, but to sort of substitute to an extent?
No, so irrespective, it's a good question, because these things that have been mentioned here, these rights that have been mentioned here, nafaqah, or even looking after individuals, this is something that we should engage in, irrespective of whether our parents are Muslim or not. And likewise, by extension, grandparents. So now, what you're describing is that you have grandparents, for example, and they have specific rights, and those rights are rights that should be fulfilled by their children and, by extension, their grandchildren. If for whatever reason their children aren't fulfilling those rights because they don't fulfill the rights of Allah, aslan, because they're not Muslims, they don't fulfill the rights of Allah. So then fulfilling the rights of their parents is secondary almost. So then what ends up happening is that there is a shortfall. And if the Muslim grandchild can see that shortfall, then it's upon them to strive in that way. But what they should do, really and truly, which goes without saying, is that they need to give da'wah to the parents. Give da'wah to the parents, beginning with Tawheed. And try to establish the matter of Tawheed. Thereafter, they can give da'wah to them in terms of the mu'amala, their dealings that they have with their parents, and establish that matter with how they deal with their parents. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
No. So, if you were to give dawah to the parents, for example, and tell them, for example, you need to look after your parents better and these are the rights that they have, it may fall upon deaf ears because it's not based upon anything. That's why the dawah needs to begin with Tawheed and establish everything with Tawheed. One similar to the brother gave me years ago when explaining a particular matter. He said, if you explain this matter in deen, it's like giving them a book, opening the book at page 100 and saying, understand what's going on in the story. Rather, what you should do is that you need to explain it from page 1. Page 1 is Tawheed, Aqidah. And you try to give them dawah with that. If they accept it, alhamdulillah, then you can move on to the obligations that maybe they've fallen short in. If you have an opportunity to, irrespective, give them dawah anyway and tell them about the obligations upon their parents, your grandparents, then do so as well anyway. But generally speaking, it should begin with Tawheed. And if for whatever reason now that isn't being established, then as the grandchildren, we should carry the slack, as they say, and pick up the shortfall in that regard. Now, Barakallahu feek.
Is there a priority when it comes to having to take care of certain people? So, for example, you mentioned those that are ascendant and those that are descendant.
Yeah.
So there's, for example, grandparents that you need to look after.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, some grandchildren.
Or if you have to look after grandparents and grandchildren, there's no specific to the team and Allah Ta'ala knows best, but it's based upon the haja and based upon who circumstance. So say for example now, if it's grandparents, there may be a case of you have grandparents, but you have siblings and cousins as well. So those grandparents are grandparents to all of them. And so there are other individuals that are able to establish those obligations. Whilst when it comes to the children, it's maybe just you that can look after those children. So that may take precedence because you're the sole wali or provider for those children. So it depends on circumstance more than anything else. No. جزاكم الله خير يا اخوان. بارك الله فيكم. صلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.